Hello, this is Ana Pacheco, SantaFe101.com. My guest today is Liz Camacho, and she is with the Economic Development Department at the City of Santa Fe. Liz, is it okay for me to record this interview?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good. So great. Well, so tell me a little bit. Well, let's start off with you first. Your background. Are you from Santa Fe, or tell me how long you've been at the city?
I've been in the city of Santa Fe since 2018. And I moved to the city of Santa Fe in 2018. So it's about 3 years now. My background is in it was international advertising. And then I moved to New York and I did just national advertising for the US.
And when you say now, did you sell ad space, or did you create advertising? What realm of advertising were you in?
I was called a strategic planner. So that usually involves market research, product development, messaging, targeting. What is the results of it? So the data behind it. Quite proudly, I've won 5 marketing awards, Effies. So, and a lot of that has to do with how do you demonstrate that you have had, that you've been effective in terms of what your communication is.
And how is that transferred over to your job here with the City of Santa Fe in economic development?
Well, when I was first brought in, we had a lot of emphasis on market research. Particularly, what we did was community outreach for the Midtown project. So at the Midtown site, we worked a lot on how do we get input from the residents of the city of Santa Fe as to what they would like to see at the Midtown campus. And so there were different phases to that project. And what I did was help orchestrate what the different phases would be and how they would be different. And we had, for instance, the first one, which was online, and we had people give us input in terms of just open input of what kinds of things they would like to see at the Midtown. It was a really fun and engaging way to do it, where you would kind of see the site visually, and then you would be able to put icons on it and say like, oh, I'd like a garden here. We'd like to see an innovation hub over here. We would love to see more workforce over here. And then that slowly evolved. We then did outreach in terms of surveys to see what kind of usage people would like to see at Midtown. From there, we worked with 5 architectural and design teams. We really wanted to really make people's kind of imagination pop, because one thing is if they ask you kind of what would you like to see, but another thing is when people who are professionals can really open your mind up to possibilities. And the 5 design teams, we worked with the Santa Fe Art Institute, and they helped us really like, how can you reimagine what the space is? And they proposed things, and we had, I believe there were about 3 different times when we had people come in and give their opinions, and it was a community project where people could come in, the architects would present to you, and they would say, you know, this is the way we would see it. We would want the site more opened up. We would want mixed use here. We would put something iconic here. We would want more traffic opening, because campus spaces in terms of educational can be a little insular. And I think one of the things that a lot of the architects brought to it was, how do you open it up to be more a part of the city? I mean, it's already kind of in the geographic, and I would also say not only the geographic, but also in people's hearts, the Midtown space. So we did that. And then we also did it so people could do it online through a tool called Metro Quest. I put together the final report, and then that turned into legislative guidelines, which is what we call the planning guidelines. So we helped put those together as well. And we got influence. We got input from many community leaders, champions, to look over what the final planning guidelines would be, as well as giving them, here is the research trajectory and how we brought it to the site. And I learned a lot in that process. And I feel incredibly grateful because as my work has evolved, I've gotten to really know and understand what people in the city of Santa Fe would like to see championed.
And so for those of you who might be watching this, the Midtown campus is the former property of the College of Santa Fe that then became the Santa Fe School of Art and Design, and now it's a vacant property. So what was, I think at one point there was an architect that was chosen, but now there's somebody else. Or can you just give me an update, like what is going to happen? Because it is as you said, it's a centrally located part of Santa Fe. It's intersects with St. Michael's and Cerrillos. I mean, it's a prime location. So do we know yet what that is going to become?
I think we're still in the process of really seeing what it will be. So we put out several things. We did one, a request for proposals, an RFP for developers. Another one we did two RFEIs, one for which the group that got it was a strategic economics. And then another one we did for community engagement. And that one, at the moment, we're working with the UNM team. I forget what the team is called. I've kind of phased out of the Midtown now. And I'd say definitely, I think the council meetings give some of the greatest insight into it, because the developer that was selected was KDC Developers. They had several sessions where they got input from the community. There were Zoom sessions because of the pandemic last summer and into the fall. I think they might have been around 5 sessions. I wasn't on the evaluation committee, but from what I remember is they had gotten such a great cohesive group of people together. So they had gotten, whether it's YouthWorks, SFCC, UNM, the film, there was somebody, what's his name? George R. R. Martin's group. And so it was just a really great eclectic group of people coming together with the developer so that this could move forward. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic and some of the economic risks and some of the assessments that were done there, they decided that they wanted to back out. And it was actually a mutual agreement of backing out. And part of the reason that we wanted to do something where it was mutual from both the part of the city and on behalf of the developer is so that we could still have the opportunity to work with all that great and eclectic group that they had brought together to be bringing the vision of people's visions to life at the campus. And many of the things that we discovered was we need a lot of work on the infrastructure, and we need work on zoning, and we need to figure these out. So the next phase that we're moving into, we're calling it incremental, or maybe it's not like we titled it that, it's just more of a description. Incremental planning, sort of like what do we look into next for what kind of work that we would need to do in terms of what buildings stay, what things need to be rezoned, how do we go into private-public partnerships, and that's the groundwork that's being done before we go into the next phase. And I think some of the feedback that we've gotten, and there's several progress reports that will be coming out as well from that team and the learnings that we have, because we've had a lot of learnings as we've gone along the process. I think many times people are like, oh, you guys are starting at zero again. We're not starting at zero. There's been a lot of learnings that we've gotten, and the planning guidelines are still going. And the UNM team for the community outreach will be starting as well, so that we can determine, here are some of the things that now we can say are actionable. So when people give us input, these are things that we can act upon. Whilst before, perhaps they were things that we could act upon, but they were much more open. And now we're starting to narrow it down.
And then, so housing is there's a shortage of housing here in Santa Fe. Do you foresee that a part of the campus will be for people to live there, or is it going to strictly be businesses at this point? Or do you know if they're leaning one way or the other?
Well, I think what we got in terms of feedback from people was they would like to see a mixed use development. So they would like to see education considered. I think that the key thing was we would like to keep capitalizing on what's already there. So there's film studios there. How can we keep bringing that to life? We have the theater there. How can we capitalize on this? We want higher education. We heard that various times from the community. We would like to continue education there. We would like to see innovation there. We would like to see affordable housing as well. And so I think that a lot of that is still continuing. And we have a website, the Midtown District, midtowndistrict.com, where people can really see kind of what the input we got from the community was.
And how did UNM get involved? Because they're out of Albuquerque. How did that become part of Santa Fe's group?
Right, but I think they're also part of the New Mexico higher educational landscape. So
that would be like right at
based in Albuquerque, they also have things that they do with Arrowhead and Las Cruces. And for us, part of it was really, and we got that a lot as well from like the Higher Education Center, from SFCC, where there's kind of a twofold thing. One, where people are like, why would we want to bring something from outside when perhaps what we can do is really how can we grow what's already here, and the experts both in our community who work here and understand our workforce and our needs. And then there are other people. It's like, we need to bring NYU in. We need to bring in RISD School of Design. We need to bring in, and we did do a lot of outreach to both of those groups to see what the possibilities were, because we had people saying this, and other people were very staunch in terms of, let's really build with what we have, and people saying, let's attract something from somewhere else. But considering the timings, a lot of the higher educational facilities were really saying, for us, it's not about necessarily creating a new campus or a new space. And we have planning departments, and those planning departments do long-term plans. They don't necessarily react in a short-term way. If we were interested in being at that campus, more than likely we would partner with another university, and what we would do is programming, as opposed to necessarily create our own branch there and build what we are interested in. That's the feedback that I primarily got from universities that were outside of New Mexico.
And what's going to happen? That's an interesting property. It was Bruns Hospital down back in World War II, and I believe there's still a couple of the old barracks is still there. Are those just going to be raised? I mean, I would imagine they're going to be raised, and like a new structure would be built there. Do you know anything about that?
I think that's going to be part of what we want the community input on. So now we have an idea, because of the work we did with the strategic economics team and with the KDC developers, as to here are the buildings. We now did an audit of them. These are some of the buildings that would not necessarily be for future use and that we may want to consider. And I think that's where we really need to go back to residents and ask them, here are some things that are very iconic. Do we keep these and really expand on them? Is this something that we tear down? And I think that's part of what the next phase of the community engagement might be about.
Well, I have to tell you, this is going back to the 1970s. I actually was a student at the College of Santa Fe, and I acted in a play with Greer Garson at the Greer Garson Theater. And when all this started happening a couple of years ago, I mean, it would just break her heart. And her husband was Buddy Fogelson. He was this rich oilman from Texas. And it would just break their heart. If, it was a beautiful library, the Fogelson Library, the Greer Garson Theater. And then because of the film studio, and because we're such a creative city, couldn't it just be like this really creative hub where it's film and theater, and I don't know how
I think of all of City of Santa Fe as a creative hub, to be honest with you. So for us to be able to centralize it in one place, I think that would be so great. And I think that that's what people are seeing, especially because it's so well located and situated. So yes, I think definitely the creativity is something that we need to keep nourishing there. I agree wholeheartedly.
And I know, we're still in a pandemic.
And you're not alone though. The students, we did a video and we of people who had formerly attended, whether it was the Santa Fe College, whether it was SFUAD, but primarily when it was College of Santa Fe, and just the input, it was the experiences that the alum had there and how they would how they feel it's such a key part of the city of Santa Fe. And obviously we still have Brother Ron and Brother Don who were there, and they speak really very much to
Don Mouton. I know Don, yeah.
First charter school in New Mexico. So yeah, there's a lot of depth and meaning to the place. And I think we want to make sure that we give continuity to it while we still evolve it.
And what is the time frame? Do you think by 2023, 2024, or what would be the time?
I would definitely say I think that would be something more of a discussion with the teams that we have and the experts that are giving us consultation. I don't think I'm as much in a position to be able to say what the time frame would be. And I think it depends on many factors. It depends also because the input we got was not necessarily just on the uses, but it's also on how do you develop it. And a lot of the things that we got in terms of feedback is we have to think about the triple bottom line. How do you make a place that's also sustainable? And then we've also gotten feedback right now from council members who are saying, how do we do something when we talk about incremental planning, where in the process of doing something long-term, you also create something short-term, like the affordable housing, as you mentioned. And I think that people are very much concerned at how can we create something that's not necessarily, maybe it all won't be built out immediately, like this is the year it's all going to start. Instead, it's something that's phased in And so we do it partially. So maybe it's not necessarily one bang of a moment, but it's something that's coming in more incrementally.
Well, I commend the city for allowing our homeless population to live in some of the dorms during the pandemic, because that was a real issue. It's like, how do we keep them from not getting sick? So I thought, I mean, again, you've already been, and I believe you've had other programs there where people, at least short term, are able to live in some of the dorms. So that, it's not just everything's just sitting vacant. So tell me, what are some of the other projects you're working on for the city of Santa Fe right now?
Well, I think our next big thing is really thinking about how are we going to recover economically? How do we develop resilience? I think one of the big learnings, various things that we've learned during the pandemic has hit high vulnerable index communities the highest. What does this mean? It means people who may be bilingual, who may be more economic, they have less income coming in. We've seen when we had spikes in certain zip codes. So we need to make sure, I think, that we bring an equity lens when we're thinking of resilience in the future. I think we need to make sure that we also diversify. I think we've been hit particularly hard, especially Santa Fe, I think, was hit the hardest in terms of the state level, in terms of tourism. So tourism, how do we bring people back, heads in beds, seats to restaurants, people in restaurants, and how do we do it safely? So I think that these are part of the things that we'll be thinking about. How do we make sure, I think that what we've seen in terms of historically is that one can also look at an economic crisis as an entrepreneurial opportunity. And it may be a time where people are thinking of, how do I start my own business? And what we want to make sure is that we support those businesses. This is also a time when we want to be looking at the mom and pop shops and small businesses, make sure that they have a good foundation. And if they are in a strong foundation, how do we then ensure that they can grow, whether they become more economic based and that they can grow? And I think a lot of that will be, how do we start coming to them? Because many times when you're an entrepreneur, you're very focused in what you're doing. And I refer to entrepreneurs, both those who are thinking about starting a business as those who have a business as well. I think a lot of times people don't think of small businesses that are already established as entrepreneur, but those are entrepreneurs all across the board. So we really need to make sure that we can strengthen what their work is.
Well, I think the pandemic has been a real lesson for all of us that we're all too dependent on tourism. I mean, there's got to be a way to even that out a little bit, because I mean, God forbid something like this happens again. I mean, it's really hurt the city, because so many of us, including myself, tourism is a big part of my income. So there's got to be. Well, do you have any ideas of like how that could be diversified?
We do have some ideas. We do have some plans that we're working with at the moment. We're working closely also with our partners at the county, and we're working with the New Mexico Economic Development Department. I think what we'll start seeing is, if the stimulus package passes, how do we start getting that money, and how do we start funneling it to our local businesses? We did the small business grant program for up to $25,000, and there's still people who are on the waiting list. So we would like to make sure that those businesses get funds as soon as possible.
Okay, good. And we're just about out of time here for the interview. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the work that you're doing in Santa Fe, and what do you feel positive? I know this has been a weird year for all of us, but how do you feel about the vitality of Santa Fe going forward?
I feel that we can not only bring it back, I think that we can build resilience and build it back stronger and more diversified. And I feel that we're willing to work together a lot more and collaborate with each other. And I think that has been a really positive outcome, where people want to capitalize and leverage what already is existing and create bonds, as opposed to necessarily duplicating work or working in silos. Collaboration, it may take a little bit more time sometimes, but I think it benefits our residents greatly.
And you're finding that in the community, that people want to work together.
Oh, I'm finding it incredibly in the community. Yes. I said, all those connections I made and all those relationships when I did the work for the Midtown, whether it was chain breakers, they helped me get out mass sanitizers to mobile home parks, to apartment buildings. Youth Works helped me put together the bags. I think it's chain breakers who help with the tutoring program that we have going on. And we work closely with the County Economic Development Department to put out the grants. And we would not have been able to do it if it hadn't been by working together.
Well, that's very promising. On that note, I would like to thank you for this interview, and we'll stay in touch. How's that?
Thank you, Anna. Thank you for having me.